over the next few years, Tom, the PI for the Greenbergs, brings a bunch of forensic pathologists on board, starting with Dr. Wayne Ross. Dr. Ross examines a piece of Ellen's spinal cord, which surprisingly the medical examiner's office still had. And in early 2017, he concludes that her cranial cavity had been punctured. According to the Oxygen Network, which profiled Ellen's case for an episode of Accident, Suicide, or Murder, Dr. Ross says that injury would have likely rendered her unconscious, which clearly would have prevented her from stabbing herself again. Dr. Ross also says that there's evidence Ellen was strangled.
What? And this is in 2017. Why is this the first time we're hearing about a strangulation?
Well, as far as I can tell, it's the first time it comes up. In his report, Dr. Ross says that a mark on the front of Ellen's neck looks like it could have come from a fingernail. And there are multiple bruises under and on the side of her neck. He also says that the bruises on Ellen's body are consistent with a repeated beating. So all in all, Dr. Ross concludes that all of the evidence points to homicide. Another expert weighs in a few months later, a detective who specializes in crime scene reconstruction. And he says blood pattern evidence suggests that Ellen's body was moved or repositioned after she died. Now remember, she was found sitting upright, but photos from the scene show this trail of blood running horizontally across her face and back towards her ear, which is, quote, against the law of gravity, end quote.
Right, and that might explain why Sam in the 911 call initially said that Ellen was on her back. Then when police get there, she's more, like you said, sitting up, slumped against the lower kitchen cabinets.
Mm-hmm.
Do we know if Sam ever mentioned touching Ellen's body before the police arrived?
We don't know, but according to Stephanie Farr's reporting, police had a theory that her body was never moved. That's what they've been working off this whole time, that she stabbed herself while she was standing and then just slid to the floor. So if Sam did move her, I don't think he ever told that to police, or it never got incorporated into their working theory. And look, we could probably do 10 episodes just on these forensic reports. You can actually find links to all of the ones I mentioned, plus others on our website. But just to simplify, what it comes down to is every expert the Greenbergs consult with says that Ellen's death is not a suicide. In late 2017, the Greenbergs' former lawyer, this guy Larry Krasner, is elected Philadelphia District Attorney. Now, he had pushed for the DA's office to reopen Ellen's case. So in order to avoid the appearance of a conflict of interest, he turns it over to the state attorney general's office. Another year passes as Josh and Sandy wait to hear more about that investigation. And when they finally do, it's not the answer they expect or want. The attorney general's office tells Stephanie Farr that additional evidence was found which supports the suicide ruling. The office says that texts between Ellen and her mom shortly before her death show that Ellen was in serious mental distress, and that an examination of Ellen's computer shows suicide-related searches from December 18th, 2010 through January 10th, 2011, including painless suicide and methods of suicide, which is strange because the investigation report from 2011 specifies that nothing related to suicide was ever found on either of Ellen's laptops. And there was no computer analysis report in the DA's file. But the Attorney General's office says that they got the results directly from the computer forensic lab that originally tested it. And they say they're not sure if any police or prosecutors had ever even seen the analysis. Plus, as Guy points out in his Facebook Live video, the chain of command was broken when it came to the computers. So the question is this even relevant? Because remember, Sam's family took them out of the apartment and had them for a couple of days after Ellen died before police ever got to analyze them.
Right.
And speaking of Guy and things that aren't in the DA's file, remember Dr. Rourke Adams?
Yeah, she was the one who Dr. Osborne casually consulted with about Ellen's spinal cord, right?
Right. Well, when Guy was looking through Ellen's file, he couldn't find a neuropathology report. And since this opinion from Dr. Rourke Adams was such a big part of the suicide ruling, he really wanted to see it. When he asked police and the medical examiner for a copy, he was told it couldn't be found or maybe didn't exist. because there wasn't even an invoice for the work that she supposedly did. The Philadelphia Inquirer asked Dr. Rourke Adams about it, and she says that she has no recollection of the case, and that since there's no report and no bill for her services, she probably never saw the spinal cord, although there is a, quote, remote possibility, end quote, that she did.
Okay, all of this is just bananas, Ashley.
Tell me about it. By this time, it's been more than 9 years since Ellen's death, and the Greenbergs have now another lawyer representing them, a man named Joe Pedraza. In June of 2019, Joe takes everything that they've gathered over the years and lays out the findings in letters to the original MEs on the case, Doctors Galino and Osborne, asking them to change the manner of death back to homicide, or at the very least, undetermined. Joe even says that there's forensic evidence that shows that 2 knives were used in the stabbing, one serrated and one smooth blade, based on how Dr. Osborne described the wounds as having smooth edges. But still, nothing happens. And for Josh and Sandy, that's the last straw. A few months later, they file a lawsuit against the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office and Dr. Osborne, seeking to have Ellen's manner of death changed from suicide to homicide or undetermined. In its response to the lawsuit, the city of Philadelphia says that the Greenbergs have no legal standing for the case. The medical examiner can't be forced to change their opinion, which the law protects. There's no requirement that a medical examiner convince the public that their findings are accurate, and there's no requirement that they change a decision just because other forensic professionals don't agree with them.
I'm sorry, I have to interrupt. But they already did? What?
Yeah, but like for the police, not the public. I don't know. It doesn't really make
like,
sense.
It just, sorry, like, I'm just like, they already did this though, so why can't they just do it again? I don't know, sorry.
I think they can. So they could at any time, but like...
They can't be forced to, right.
Now, the city also says that the Greenbergs' lawyers have misrepresented statements from Dr. Osborne and other medical professionals to fit the homicide manner of death ruling that they want. And Dr. Osborne lays out and defends his reasoning for changing the ruling from homicide to suicide. To him, it wasn't just pressure. He says it was facts that persuaded him. He mentions the spinal cord evaluation by Dr. Rourke Adams, which leaves open the possibility that Ellen would still be able to stab herself. He says there's the lack of defensive wounds and the fact that some of the injuries are really shallow, which could be what's known as hesitation wounds, like tentative cuts a person makes when they're like testing out what it feels like. And he says there are the statements from Sam and the busted door lock that support his story. The witness who apparently saw him do it. No signs of a struggle. Nothing was stolen.